Greetings friends, Salty Rose here at the Ventura Music Factory in industrial Ventura, and today I want to talk about my American Original P-Bass. My original rig was a 1974 Fender jazz bass, and now I'm talking back in the 70s. I had a 74 jazz bass, a custom 200 pleated tuck and roll amplifier with a pair of Sun cabinets. Each cabinet had two 15-inch speakers in it. It was a lot of gear to haul around. I played parties with that rig. I played shows with it. I think I recorded with it, but I'm not sure. At some point in the early 80s, I bought an Ibanez Blazer bass because I wanted a P-Bass. And the Ibanez was probably cheaper than a Fender, but it had a maple neck and it had a split pickup just like a P-Bass. And I know for sure that I recorded with it because I have a picture of me playing it at Quad Tech Studio in West LA with the Easy Street Band. At some point, I traded my 74 jazz bass for a Les Paul. Shortly after that, I bought a 1965 P-Bass, a real one. It was considered a pre-CBS, even though it was probably made after the sale to CBS. For all intents and purposes, it was a pre-CBS P-Bass. It was a lovely bass. I wished I would have never sold it, but I did. Eventually, I did get my 74 jazz bass back because the guy who I had traded it 2 years before, he sold it back to me. So I still have the 74 jazz bass. I tend to keep it. There's a lot of sentimental value attached to it, but I do like having a good P-Bass. Now, a couple of years ago, I was doing some recordings at a studio. I went over to do some scratch tracks, and the engineer had what looked to me like a pre-CBS P-Bass on his rack. I picked it up, and it was amazing. It looked and felt just like my 65. And I asked him what it was. I said, hey, is this a real pre-CBS Fender? And he wasn't sure. On closer inspection, I could tell it was a reissue. And I believe it was one of those AVRI 62 reissues. And that bass was amazing. I asked him on the spot if he'd sell it to me, and he declined my offer. He declined to even let me make an offer. So ever since then, I've been looking for one of those. I love my jazz bass, but I miss my 65 P-Bass, and I miss that old Ibanez Blazer too. There's a book that Geddy Lee put out called The Big Beautiful Book of Bass, and there's a chapter in there where he talks to the guitar tech from The Who, Alan Rogan. And Alan Rogan in that book said, there's only one bass, the P-Bass. And if you want the other sound, get a jazz bass. So I kind of started out with the other sound. Once I really did play a P-Bass, I discovered that to me, the P-Bass is kind of like to basses what the Les Paul is to guitars. It's just an instrument that will work in so many different environments, and you can always depend on it. Even if it's not the ideal instrument for what you're doing, you're going to get something out of it that you can use. I was looking for a P-Bass for a long time, and when they stopped making the American Originals, I heard they were going to come out with a new American Vintage reissue line. When I found an American Original at Guitar Center, and it was after they stopped making them, I went in, did some horse trading, traded another guitar that I had. And one of the things I like about Guitar Center is they will give you a 10% discount on anything new when you're trading in old gear. With the way the new tax laws are working, more and more doing a trade like that, especially if you can get a discount on something expensive that you want to buy, that makes sense to me. So anyhow, I got this American Original 60s P-Bass. There it is over in the corner. It's an amazing guitar. The neck is probably a little bit bigger and fatter than the one I remember on my 65. I put a set of Gotoh Res-O-Lite Tuners on it. That takes 4 ounces off of the bass, and by knocking that 4 ounces off of that P-Bass, that bass now weighs 8 pounds 8 ounces, which is something I can live with at my age now. So anyhow, I got to play a show with my American Original 60s P-Bass over the weekend with a band called Pro-Am. We played with a band from Ventura called Bird Brain. Those guys were super fun. And we played in between Bird Brain and a group called, shouldn't call them a group, I Pro-Am played on the bill in between Bird Brain and the legendary punk band Roman's Weirdos. The bass player from the Weirdos, his name is Danny, and he brought a GK 400RB, an early one from the early 80s. That was one of the bass amps that I couldn't afford back then. I always wanted one. I never got to play through one. And so this was my first experience playing on that amp, and what a hoot. I probably didn't get the best tone out of it. I tend to like sort of like that Chris Squire, Geddy Lee, smacking the bass, especially playing punk rock, Can't help it. You're going to kick the shit out of the guitar a little bit. That GK 400RB, it gave me a sound that was somewhat reminiscent to my old Custom 200. It had a lot of clang. It probably had a lot more bottom end available, but I didn't really put it to use. Anyhow, the show was a good time, and I'm going to leave you with some clips from the show. I hope you enjoyed this little history of my bass playing. If you did, please like, subscribe. You can even share this video if you want. And I want to thank you, my friends. I'll see you on the next one.